Thanks so much for tuning in to One Day at a Time, integrating daily STEM exploration into your classroom. Today we're going to learn from early childhood STEM specialist Kengo Yamada about how to make STEM exploration a daily habit in your classroom. But before we get started, we're going to give you a little bit of background about us and what we do. For those of you, again, who tuned in yesterday or who are regular, just, again, bear with us for these next few minutes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Williams, and I want to tell you a little bit about the origins of Paige and Paxton. They were actually created during my children's childhood. I was a young mom, and I wanted to make sure that my two girls had every advantage possible. And so I saw having them proficient and passionate about math and science as the way to do that. And so like a lot of parents, I tried a lot of things. But one thing that really seemed to resonate with them were these two little puzzle piece characters that I created in order to make the concepts more fun and engaging. So then you fast forward 20 years and something amazing has happened. My youngest daughter, Jessica, she's completing degrees in biology and chemistry, and she's also involved in pipelining programs to get kids interested in science. And my oldest daughter, Kelly, she was actually a rising star in the financial services industry, and she was also involved in national pipelining programs, but on the tech side. She was trying to get kids interested in technology. As a matter of fact, she was one of the founding members of the New York chapter of Black Girls Code.
Just like the programs my sister and I were involved in, most programs and curriculum, as I'm sure most of you guys know, focus at the middle and high school level. And we believe that is like building a roof without a foundation. My sister and I told my mom, and we had this really crazy idea about actually bringing those puzzle piece characters back to life that she made for us when we were little. Of course, Mom thought we were crazy at first, but then we convinced her to build out our first iteration of that formal early childhood STEM curriculum to engage a whole new generation on STEM. And so here's why what we do is super important. So globalization has given us a lot of tremendous benefits to our society and economy, but at the same time it presents a very unique set of challenges for our kids. 30 years ago, 40% of the world's scientists and engineers came from the U.S. Today that number is 15%. So our kids are and will be competing with people across the globe. And for them to be successful, we really can't rely on the status quo. We also found that about 80% of adults in STEM fields today actually have at least one peer in the field. So that has huge implications for our children. And in order to move the needle, we really have to start a lot earlier. And luckily, we have teachers and educators just like you who can be a really big conduit of this change. But we know with increasing pressures on educators in the classroom, that you really need the right training and resources to drive that STEM interest and create a STEM mindset in your students while meeting all those other requirements that you need at the early childhood level, particularly literacy and also mathematics, which are the really foundational elements of any child's education. So we do this in two ways. We offer classroom curriculum that gives K through 2nd teachers a blueprint for infusing STEM into their classrooms. And we support them with not only with curriculum, but STEM-focused training, which isn't readily available, and also ongoing coaching. And then this summer, we launched our informal curriculum, which are super fun, Paige and Paxton make-a-thons. And these are these really cool events where kids 4 to 7 and their parents come in for a day of STEM challenges led by STEM professionals, which are based on the Paige and Paxton book series. So if we have a civil engineering module, a challenge, the kids are being led by an actual civil engineer in their community. And so from this, since we gave our mom the idea to delve into this full time, we've been growing in really amazing ways. So today we are used in 16 school systems across the country, and we trained over 500 educators in early STEM. We've held our STEM make-a-thons in Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., working with local school districts and other partners such as the Girl Scouts of America and General Assembly, the global ed tech company. And so with your help, we can do even more. If you enjoyed this webinar today, please feel free to reach out to us to learn more about our curriculum, what we provide, or if or just tell other educators and colleagues about what we do and what we're trying to achieve. So now enough about us. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we're very lucky to have Kango on the call today. He is a STEM enrichment early childhood specialist at the Liberty Science Center, which is a 300,000 square foot learning center in the heart of Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm going to go ahead and let Kango, we're going to go ahead and let Kango take it from here. And Kango, I may go, oh, there you go. Just want to tell you to unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be speaking with all of you here together with Paige and Paxton. So, like Kelly said, I work at the Science Center, and I teach in a very individual way and do informal education for particularly our preschool to second grade students and groups that come to the Science Center. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about ways that I found to STEM education to happen at the early childhood level. What I believe, and I love this quote by Stone McDonald in 2011, she talked a lot about why STEM can happen at the early childhood level, right? And a lot of the times I feel that early childhood educators might feel really foreign to the idea of STEM happening within their classroom. But the real truth is that STEM is already very often happening within their classrooms, within their centers, particularly very common in our block centers, in our discovery centers with manipulatives and things that are very easily translate to those ideas of science, technology, engineering, and math. A lot of the times they're building houses and structures, and many times they fall down. But a lot of the times that allows them to reevaluate their houses or their buildings and kind of go through the process of choosing a better design. And in that way, they're already doing the engineering design process. So that first quote, in which I really enjoy, allows us to really think about the idea that STEM is already happening within our classrooms. So today I wanted to talk with you about some ideas of ways we can integrate STEM activities within the other portions of our day, besides our center time, right? Because at the early childhood level, there's a lot that we need to see happen, particularly for our young ones. So I want to talk with you guys about some ways that you can include STEM activities within your other portions, like your read aloud time and your outdoor play time, right? So here are some different portions of your day, right? Because I don't want to give you guys something else to have on your plate, right? But ways we can include STEM activities within these portions of your day that already need to happen, right? You always need a read aloud time. Your children will always have a certain period of time outdoors, and you always start with a morning meeting. So what are some activities that we can include within our curriculum to embed STEM within these portions of our day? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So really quickly, here are some brief examples to start us off on activities that you can possibly do within your classroom within some of those portions of your day, right? And one of the things that I really love about Paige and Paxton is that idea of having STEM connected with literacy, right? And I strongly believe that STEM activities can and do translate well to the different themes that we have going on within our preschool curriculums, as well as the literacy aspects and stories that we have already within our classrooms. So on the screen you can see very familiar stories like the 3 bears, Snowy Day, Corduroy, right, and the 3 pigs. These activities and these stories translate well to different activities that we're going to be talking about, and we'll get into further as we go along. But these activities in themselves, they're really great as one activity if we want to do it here and there. But in order to really go further with our young learners and help them build a mastery of the subject matter, right? Although these topics might really be introduced to other people at second grade levels or higher, I strongly believe that we can include and help them build a mastery of the subject by including them and introducing them at the preschool level and allowing them through experience and repeated exposure to build a mastery of that subject and a familiarity with it, right? Because we all feel that our young ones, they learn through experience and the ability to touch and feel everything. So giving them the opportunity through lessons that build on top of one another, I feel we can do that with concepts that might be a little bit challenging, but through repeated time and effort, we can really help them build a familiarity with. So the first one we're going to start with is the idea of helping our young learners learn about simple machines. So what we're going to be talking about right now is sort of building a unit around certain subjects, the first being simple machines. So for simple machines, the one that I felt really worked well for our youngest learners is the idea of a lever, right? And where I would recommend starting is taking you out for a walk around the neighborhood. A lot of times your students during the nicer days outside, they go for a walk, and taking your students out for a walk to the local park and finding a seesaw that is working in your local park and really helping them take a look at the various parts of a working seesaw. They can see the fulcrum, they can see the different parts of this lever that you would add your load and your effort, and helping them kind of draw it out, allowing them to take a piece of paper and a crayon or a marker and label and draw out the different parts of that seesaw. And then after they take that back to the school, revisiting it during another subsequent activity where in your circle time you introduce a balance beam, which works a lot like a lever, right? And through that introduction of this one toy or this one scientific tool, you introduce a new morning routine where many times we have counting bears within our classroom environment. So utilizing the counting bears as a check-in when they arrive in the morning, you can have boys having a certain color counting bear like purple, and girls having a very different counting bear like yellow or blue or green, right? And having the boys putting it on one side and the girls putting it on the other side as they come into the morning, right? And as they add their counting bears onto either side, you can have the children informally or formally notice what's happening with the lever. Is one side going up? Is the other side going down? And having them notice those things and then taking a look at the end of the day or during your morning meeting in circle time, counting those bears on each side. So you're doing a lot of science, taking a look at the weight of the materials, but you're also doing a lot of math as well, having them count and do activities like that. Even charting, when you chart to see who's here today, you can, through that process, cover the different ideas of STEM. After that, you can very easily translate into recalling the stories that are happening in your classroom. One of them being our fairy tale study and the 3 bears. Right? After they've built a familiarity with the balance beam and with the process of adding their counting bears to the different sides, you can recall the story of the 3 bears by having them look at, okay, if we put Mama Bear over here, who's a medium-sized bear, and then Papa Bear on this side, which is a larger bear, right, of our counting bears, since they most often come in small, medium, and large, where should we put Baby Bear to make our balance beam a little bit more level? So then you're adding that complex aspect of not only including their literacy in your read aloud time, but then including STEM within it, right? Integrating those science, technology, engineering, and math within that activity, right? Going over again math and science. And this then can be introduced within your discovery center, your library centers during their center time so they can recall the story, but also manipulate not only the counting bears, but other tools that you might want to introduce to have them play with within that center and activity. The last being an engineering aspect, having your students build a lever, a very simple lever using very simple materials. Very often we do this with our young learners where we have them construct a lever using a 12-inch ruler, a regular marker for the fulcrum and 2 small cups for where they can add load and where they can add effort, right? So then having them construct this, we thereby include our engineering portions of STEM within that activity, but still allowing them to cover science and math within that activity as well. So this is what I mean by building a sort of a unit around different science topics, in this case, simple machines. Now for matter, I really love introducing matter at the early childhood level, and I think it can translate well. Normally it doesn't happen until our students reach 2nd grade, but like I was saying before, we can introduce it at for our young ones slowly and by having them build familiarity with the subject. So where I would start would be with our water table, which we always have within our classroom. It's very popular. We normally have lots of toys within the water table already, and these introduce with our students as solids. And a great way to start with them is talking about how those toys feel. Normally they would say the toys feel hard, and that's great. That's a great observation. And then giving them the language to think about hard things as solid things. They're solid, we can't break them very easily, they keep their shape, right? So toys would be solid, right? And then having different solids that both sink and float. And through this process, you can talk about mass. Toys and matter has mass and volume. So mass is how much stuff is within that object, within that solid. And then the things that sink have more mass, whereas the things that float have less mass. And through this process, you're talking a little bit about the introduction of matter, particularly solid. And then afterwards, you can go on what I call a matter hunt with your students, walking throughout the classroom and taking a look if you can find other solids. And this would be a large amount of objects in your classroom, whether they be the unit blocks already present, the books in your library, the plants within your discovery center, the brushes within your art center, but also thinking about the liquids as well, where they be your paints, the water in your water table, or other things that you might have present, right? And the gases. So the gases might be the hardest thing to think about, but there's an activity coming up where we can have our students observe what might be a gas, right? But where I would end with our students for going on a matter hunt would be having them chart the different items they've observed and found on their matter hunt. And then we can include our math within that particular activity. For going into idea of gas, we can do an Alka-Seltzer and water experiment with our young ones. And this is a great place to include a parent as it needs a lot of fine motor practice, as well as if there's any latex allergies you want to be aware of in our classroom as well. There's a very simple experiment we can do with latex balloons, water, and a plastic bottle that we can have happen within first your circle time to introduce the activity, but then within your discovery center with having a parent who has the ability to see the activity happen within your circle time, and then giving them the opportunity to guide the activity during your centers or during another portion of your day where you have a parent present. And what would basically happen is you have a plastic bottle with some water inside, and you can take the Alka-Seltzer and break it in half, and then stuff it inside the latex balloon. And then when it's in the latex balloon, you can usually start with half of the Alka-Seltzer tablet, and you break it up once it's in the latex balloon a lot more. You cover the lip of the plastic bottle with the latex balloon, and then just turn the latex balloon upside down so the Alka-Seltzer goes into the water. And what should occur is a chemical reaction, releasing carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide creates gas, right? And that gas then fills up the container, or in this case, it's balloon. So you're not only talking about gas, but reintroducing those very beginning concepts of matter, which in this case is our solids like our Alka-Seltzer and our liquids like our water. And you're allowing them to recall those things and revisiting that concept. And it's a very simple activity to do with them in the classroom. to reintroduce the solid, liquid, and gases within your classroom, you can also think about doing a dry ice versus ice experiment with your students. And there's a great read aloud that can go along with this activity with Ezra Jack Keith's Snowy Day. I love that story, and what I would recommend is while reading that story with your students, have 2 cups of one with dry ice and one with regular ice. The dry ice is very different from regular ice. It's much colder, and what it will do is it will sublimate, meaning it will go straight from a solid state to a gas state. So they won't see liquid or water forming at the bottom of their cup. They will see a lot of gas coming. So as they sit and read their story, allowing them to have those 2 cups by you, and then observing what's happening to the ice as they complete their story or read during their read aloud time. A great thing to do afterwards is pour some water into both cups and see what happens. In the regular cup, nothing will happen. It'll look like just a regular cup of ice water. Whereas the dry ice, a large cloud will form that is very safe to touch. It's nice and cool. But the thing about dry ice is the dry ice itself should not be touched. It's frozen carbon dioxide, but if it's touched too long, it will create a small little burn on the hand. But what you would do is just have a pair of tongs. The cup itself is safe to touch when the dry ice is inside, but the dry ice itself shouldn't be touched. And with what we do with our students is we take that opportunity, working with dry ice, to talk about lab safety with them. So Mr. Kango is always the one and the only one that can touch our dry ice, whereas since he has the tongs, he has those scientific tools that allow him to use the dry ice and pick it up and put it away. So I would take that opportunity to do that as well. So for the next activity, what I would, a great subject to introduce within your classroom would be light. Now, light and energy isn't talked about with until first grade, but I feel like it's a great thing to do within your classroom as well. A great place to start would be during your morning meeting and talking about different objects within the classroom that you can observe that are, different qualities to them. And taking a flashlight and shining the light towards the floor and covering that light with various objects, whether they be your books, your paper plates, your Tupperware lids, a piece of plastic bottle, a piece of saran wrap, things like that. Very simple materials that you can already find around your classroom or have available to you that you can use to talk about with your students how the light is interacting with these different materials. And through that process, you can introduce words like transparent, right? Those objects that allow light to go through and create a bright picture on the other side. Translucent, which creates a fuzzy picture on the other side. And our opaque objects, which create a shadow, right? That do not let any light penetrate, right? And through this process, what I would do afterwards is read Don Freeman's story, Corduroy. And corduroy is a great example to follow up with introducing these 3 words and this concept, because in the story, corduroy is found by that security guard, and the security guard shines a light on him, and we can see corduroy's shadow. So having students think about what would corduroy be, transparent, translucent, or opaque, and corduroy would be opaque. Seeing about students whether or not how they would feel which one he would be, and possibly charting it within our circle time as a transitional activity away from our read aloud into the next portion of our day. So we can introduce the concepts of science as well as math again with them. As a follow-up activity for introducing transparent, translucent, and opaque, what I would do with our students is building a simple circuit. Now, if you haven't done this already, there's a lot of tutorials online for building simple circuits out of materials that are either purchasable through Amazon or easily accessible elsewhere. And I have a couple of places that we buy our materials to do a simple circuit activity that I can let you guys know about if you would like that information after I'm all done. But basically, a simple circuit, you would allow them to manipulate what, or think about what they hear in the word circuit. And very often they would point out that circuit sounds a lot like circle. And that's a great place to start, allowing them to use those alligator clips to make first a circle form. And in that process, you're reintroducing the concept of 2D shapes with them and having them see that again. Then you just take your alligator clips and hook it onto a battery holder as well as a light bulb holder. And through that process, the light bulb should turn on so they can see how the light or the energy from within the battery travels around in a circle to their light bulb lighting up that circuit. And they can see how a simple circuit is a circle, a complete circle. The reason we do this is I'll introduce later on, but a great place to follow up with that activity with simple circuits is doing a conductor and insulator activity. And like the simple circuit activity, there's a lot of different tutorials online for how to do this within your classroom. But the materials, those conductive and insulative materials, are very easily accessible within your classroom. Normally for us at the Science Center, we use pennies, tin foil, paper clips, construction paper, and materials that the children are very used to handling, right? Because we want to make sure we're allowing them to feel comfortable with those materials. And more often than not, they feel comfortable if they've touched and manipulated those things prior to their visit. So what they do is they take those alligator clips that they connected to their battery, and they take a third alligator clip. And if you can think about what I'm describing, that third alligator clip hooks onto the battery, and they take the two left over that don't have a place to hook up to, and they connect them to whatever item they have laid out that they're going to test is conductive or insulative. And if it lights up and allows the light to light up, it is a conductive material, meaning it's allowing those electrons to flow across their simple circuit. Whereas if it's an insulative material, an insulator, like their construction paper, it doesn't allow the light to light up. So where we would do this is just allowing them to have those materials in front of them and really giving them the opportunity to play and experiment with the different materials. And this is a great thing to have happen within your Discovery Center, to introduce STEM and those concepts. And through that activity, in the middle of that activity, they can sort and classify those materials within their bag, or however you have them presented to them, and classifying them as either conductive or insulative materials. The last thing I would do with our light experiment and our light unit would be having them build a simple, very simple flashlight. There's a lot of tutorials online for ways to build a simple flashlight and ways to build a simple flashlight using conductive and insulative materials, mainly conductive materials. And this is a great build-off after they've learned about how light works on different materials, how to build a simple circuit, differences between conductive and insulative materials, conductors and insulators, and a great opportunity for your parents, again, to come into your classroom, learn the activity, and then do the activity with the children within your class. They can build that simple flashlight, and then take that simple flashlight that they have constructed together on their own or with their parents, and then shine on their own their light onto the different materials in your classroom, and then use the words that they've built over time, and really point out to their parents, oh, this is a conductive material, or oh, this is transparent, oh, this is translucent and opaque, and why those things are what they are. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk with you guys about is our transportation themes. Now, I love transportation when I was talking about transportation when I was a preschool teacher. And one of the great things that we do is talk all about different vehicles within our environment, right? Cars and buses and trucks and things A great place to start when building a unit around transportation and trying to introduce STEM within the classroom is the idea of what an engineer is. And we'll talk a little bit about why we're starting with this in just a moment. But Sherry Winkler's Good Night construction site is a great place to introduce that concept of an engineer with your students and having them point out what they see the engineer is doing. And afterwards, you can introduce the engineering design process, which we talked a little bit at the start of this presentation. The idea of having them build a plan, then execute that plan, and reevaluate that plan and redesign their building after they see that it doesn't work quite as they thought it would. And this can be done many times within their construction or their block centers as a choice activity. A great place to start after introducing this concept is through introducing paper sailboats. So instead of just introducing buses and trains and cars and things like that, having, if you live in an area where there's water readily available or nearby, having your students observe and think about sailboats and boats that they might see around their neighborhood. What I would do with them is this is a great activity to happen within your art center. And how we can do this is taking a lot of variety of materials, different bowls, different plates made of different materials, paper napkins, different construction paper, wax paper, and allowing the students to, after we talk a little bit about the parts of a boat and what it has, allowing them to construct a boat of their own choosing, allowing them to put together these materials and make a boat that they can later, using their own breath, sail across their art table, and allowing them to see how far their boat can go based on just using their own breath, right? And they can measure how far it goes using either non-standard or standard measurement using manipulatives like the counting bears or unit 6 cubes, or if your students are a little bit more advanced, giving them a ruler or a tape measure to measure out the distance traveled. And this is a great activity for introducing that engineering design process, both in the sailboat activity, but also this paper helicopter activity. So here's a tutorial or a simple template that you can use for thinking about how it would look like when you construct it with your students. And it's a very simple process. You just cut on the different parts of it and then you fold it. And what should happen is after letting it go from a certain height, usually a meter high, it should start to turn. And it's just like a helicopter would. And this is a great activity to have in your art center or also your block center if they want to build a city around the block center and talk about the different vehicles, right? They'll have their cars and their trains, but also having them think about if they've ever seen a paper helicopter. So allowing them to make their paper helicopter and then have it drop and fall within their block center and talk about the helicopters they see around their neighborhood. A great activity to do after this and include with it is talking about the planes. So recently I saw a great activity around using and constructing styrofoam airplanes. And there's a great tutorial online if you look up Jack Reynolds in the National Model Aviation Museum. He has a great tutorial and lesson plan around creating a paper or styrofoam helicopter like you see on the presentation. And what it is those little flaps. You can manipulate them with your young learners and allow them to see the different, over here and over here, the different ways you can add more lift for your students for their styrofoam helicopters. And as they throw them based on how they manipulate the flaps, they will either make it purposely turn left or purposely turn right. So they're doing this process, talking about science, but also talking about engineering. And then, like we did with our paper sailboats, allowing them to measure the distance traveled by their styrofoam helicopters, or styrofoam airplanes rather, using non-standard and standard measurements. Okay, so that was those activities. I hope they're very helpful. What I would do and recommend for our final tips is just thinking about ways that we can include, like we touched on just a moment ago, different ways we can include STEM within our daily experience, right? And a lot of the materials we use don't necessarily need to be expensive materials, right? They are some materials that you already have in your classroom, right? We most likely have styrofoam plates around, or paper, or different materials that we can make sailboats out of, and rulers and markers to make levers within our classroom. But thinking about ways we can create activities around these very simple materials and within our classrooms to introduce STEM concepts for our students. And one of the things I really would love to encourage you to try and do is invite your parents and community members to participate. When I was teaching, particularly around the idea of transportation, I'd see if there were any community members that knew engineers or people that would be on a construction site that would love to come in and talk about that experience with our students. And I would encourage you to do the same with your students. But the last and foremost would be I would encourage you to have fun, as the process is a learning experience not only for you and your students, but also for yourself as a teacher and for myself. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate, like I said, the opportunity to speak with you all here.
Great, wonderful. So at this time, we'll take questions from the audience. To ask a question, all you have to do is enter your question into the chat box on your console. So we'll give you guys a second. So we have a question. So how well have your approaches been able to connect kids to the science concepts and the engineering concepts to like real life applications?
For talking about particularly matter, I think it works well with talking about students with the different ideas of the states of matter, and then introducing with the students a profession. At that level, I would say it's really a simple introduction, and let's see, I'm not sure. Is there a specific real-world concept that they're looking for, or different subject that they're looking for specifically?
No, I mean, it doesn't say, but no, I think I was just wondering about, in addition to going through the thought process, whether they have also been able to like connect those that you've been learning to like real life concepts, I guess is the question.
Well, probably the easiest one to do would be the engineering. I think with the students, talking about the engineering design process translates well to real-world application. We're thinking about what makes a structure like a building or a house structurally sound, and having them think about why their building stands up to things like lots of wind or severe weather. For example, when Katrina was happening, we were thinking about what makes our buildings really structurally sound, what makes it sustain that weather. And we can talk about having buildings having a solid support structure.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Another question came in. Are you able to integrate STEM activities into everyday lessons, or have you been able to achieve that?
With our young ones here at the Science Center, we don't normally see them every day, but with the idea of integrating with an everyday experience, I would try and encourage things like introducing them into the daily routine. So if you have, for example, the introduction of the balance beam as part of your new classroom routine, and having them continually do that, you can keep introducing and reviewing the concept of weight, as well as ways to introduce measurement and review measurement with your students throughout the year, if that makes sense.
We had another quick question. How many times a week are the kids with you?
It really depends. Sometimes we have programs that are 45 minutes in length and just a single visit, but then we have programs that are more than one visit per month. So we have a group of homeschool families right now that have been doing a chemistry program with us where they've been coming for about 5 weeks now, and we've been introducing the different states of matter with them, doing the Alka-Seltzer activity, but then afterwards talking about simple circuits, but also about what makes a chemical reaction a chemical reaction. So we're taking a look coming up about what happens when we introduce borax to slime, and making slime as well as making color-sensitive slime by adding thermochromic pigment to it. So what we're doing with our colorful chemistry unit is taking the beginning process, the first visit is just introducing the simple states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas. And after we did that, we reviewed the solids, liquids, and gas through the dry ice experiment we talked about. After we did the dry ice experiment, we talked about what is a chemical reaction by taking a look at making slime. And slime we can make using Elmer's glue, a little bit of water. Then you take a little bit of food coloring and just stir it around. And it takes a form when you add borax into a non-Newtonian fluid. So something that is not quite a solid and not quite a liquid. And it's sort of in between. And during that process, we introduce a new concept. But afterwards, to end with those students that are with us, we're going to be doing an observation of what happens when we cool down matter, like solids, liquids, and gases. Since at the second grade level, they talk a lot about what happens when we cool down and heat matter. And we're going to be doing that by looking at what happens when we introduce solids, liquids, and gases, like a banana or a balloon that's blown up using carbon dioxide to liquid nitrogen, and seeing what happens to those things. Do they become brittle, or they start to shrink, or they become make a cloud, like when we add liquid nitrogen to, or water to liquid nitrogen.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those questions. And for now, if that's all the questions we can take for today, but if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to Kingo directly at his email address provided above. For those of you who attended today, you will receive a professional development certificate via email, and we will send that to the email address that you used to register for the webinar by the end of the week. Oh, wait, actually, I got one more question for us. Before we're going to take one more question. So we have from Billy. It says, I would like to try the light unit with my diverse learners at the primary level. What are some safety measures I should use to put into place while completing the second activity, building a circuit? Or step 3, create a simple circuit activity. I really the idea of putting material at a center to test.
Mm-hmm. So what I would recommend for building a simple circuit would be using the alligator clips. The alligator clips allow for a lot of fine motor practice, but they allow the current to stay within and won't give your students any opportunity to be shocked or what have you by using those things. And there's a lot of different materials online for having the battery encased as well. If you look into cell modular battery holders from Amazon, you can buy a 4-pack of these very plasticky looking battery holders for D batteries that would keep your battery encased. And that way, if you have it in there, all you have to do is attach the alligator clips to a little piece of metal that's sticking out that's rounded so it won't hurt your students, but allows them to clip the alligator clips to those metal pieces so they don't have to stick it onto the different ports on their battery itself, because those ports are going to get rather hot, so that way it's nice and much more safe for your students. When using the different conductor and insulative materials, I would just stick with very simple materials around your classroom. Paper clips, brass fasteners, tinfoil would be a great conductor, and pennies are great as well.
Thank you again for that question, and thank you for answering that. So if you guys, wrapping up what we said before, if you forget something said today, please don't fret. The webinar transcript and recording will be available by next Wednesday. So thank you again for everybody who was able to join us. And thank you, Kingo, for taking time out of your schedule to pull this content together, all your best practices with the community.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope it was helpful to everyone participating.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody.